All right, so now we're going to make a map layout in QGIS using this data layer. So this is data from the census at the county level, and this is South Dakota. And specifically, I'm showing the percent of the population in the county that have earned a bachelor's degree. So I've already basically symbolized it the way that I want. So I have a collar ramp chosen, a number of breaks. I've configured the legend labels. So it's ready to move into a layout. I'm going to also just turn on the base map for a minute because it's down. So just for a later demonstration. All right, so there's our layout. So if you want to create a new layout, you can click on this button. And there should be options to add a new layout in one of these menus, and I can never seem to find it. Project. There we go. New print layout. So you do it there, or you could just click this button. So if you click this button, it's going to ask you to name it. So I'm just going to call it Layout 2 because I already was messing with another layout in this project. So I'm going to hit OK. And then that launches this window. So this is the layout editing window. So this is like layout view for those of you that work in ArcMap or like a layout, like if you work in ArcPro. Okay, so I'm going to start off by adding some features. Note there's options for adding up here, and there's other options over here. So what I'm going to do is add an item, and I'm going to start off with a map. Okay, so it's rendered that map out. And first off, I don't want to have the base map showing. This is why I turned it on, so I could show you this. So we go back to this map, I turn the base map off. This should update to reflect the base map. Sometimes it's slow to update. Let me see here. So like a refresh option. There it goes. It just took a second. All right, so there we have our map. It's not taking up enough of the page, so I'd like to zoom in a bit. So I do that as I just change this scale under the properties for this layer. And to get into the properties, you do right-click, Item Properties. If you do I think the dimensions of this are fine, but you can also do page properties and like change the dimensions and the orientation and whatnot. So it's defaulted to A4, like European paper size, and then landscape orientation. And you can also change like the background color for the image. I think this is fine, or for the layout. I think this is fine, so we'll just leave it. Okay, so go back to this. Let's change our scale. So I want to zoom in a bit, so let's change this to, let's do 35. Wasn't sure how many zeros there were. I think that looks reasonable, so we'll leave it at that. So note that by default, there's no border around the map. If you wanted to turn a border on, then you can go down to, if you're in the map object, and down here we have frame options, so that added a frame to it. I actually don't generally like to put frames on unless I'm just trying to break up space. So I'm going to turn that off. And you can also manipulate the background. So right now it's white. Should be able to like make it transparent if you want. I'm just going to pull the transparency all the way down. We don't really need a background showing. Okay, so that's the basic map. So before we move on, just a couple other notes. You can change the size and position of the frame. You can add grid systems like gradicules or like a coordinate system grid. I don't think this map that would really add to this map, so we'll leave it. You could rotate the map. I'm happy with this. I think we're ready to move on, so we'll leave it be. Note you also can change the projection. Just note it there. All right, so let's add some more elements. So I'm going to add in a legend next. So I'm going to do add legend, and I'm going to draw in a legend. Okay, so a couple notes about this. First off, it has two objects. Even though I turned off the base map, it's still listed in there. So we can remove that. And also it has like the file name, which is, not preferred. So we'll also get rid of that. So we just basically have the percentages. Okay, so let's go over to our properties. Again, if that isn't up, you just go to item properties. Now we want to click on the legend as opposed to the map. One thing you have to do if you want to make changes is this auto update, which is on by default. You're going to turn that off. So turn that off, and that'll let you change the legend so it doesn't automatically update if you change the map. Okay, so like for example, the base map isn't shown, and we don't want it to show up in the legend. So if I click on it now, I should be able to delete it. And note that was removed. There's a title. The title was blank, but if you wanted, you could put in a title. Again, you really shouldn't use legend as a legend title. So there's really only one thing and one set of symbols here. I don't really feel like we need a legend title, so I'm just gonna keep that off. I also don't feel like we need to have the title of the data layer. So to change that, you can click on it here and change it. So for example, we wanted to put this is percent bachelor degree, and that'll switch that out. I actually think since there's only one set of values here, we really don't need a title at all. So I'm just going to change this to blank. Sometimes I notice you have to put in a couple returns there just to get it to recognize that you mean blank. Okay, so a couple other comments with this. So first off, I think I would like to change this a bit. So I'm going to do that. So let's go down here to symbol, and I'm going to make the symbols a bit bigger. So this is making them wider and then taller. I think that looks pretty good. And then we probably would want to have the text be a little bit bigger, so we can go in here to font. And this is for the different components of the legend. The only real text we have now is the item labels, because everything else has been removed or just wasn't there to begin with. So I'm going to click on this, and this allows us to pick a font. So I'm just going to use like a Tahoma font, and you can pick a font size. So I'm going to bump this up to 18. Yeah, I think that looks a lot better in terms of using space. I'm going to move this up a little so they don't overlap as much. There also should be an option to make the background transparent too. So if I go to background, actually we turn it off. She does not have a background. Yes, there we go. That would help with some overlap. So pull this down a little now. Okay, so I think that looks reasonable. I don't think we need to make any additional changes to the legend. All right, so next I'm going to add a scale bar. So I'm going to add items, add scale bar. I'm going to draw out a scale bar. And by default here, it puts on a 1 kilometer scale bar. So again, you have to grab that item over here in the item list, and then you can manipulate it. So there's different styles available. So just clicking through here, double, single, that's what it started with. I like that, so we'll just leave it, but you can fiddle with this and change the style of the legend. I think kilometers makes sense. If you want to you could switch it into miles. Note how it's trying to keep it rounded off nice. I do like that, how that works in the software. That's the label, so you could, change it to spell kilometers out if you wanted. All right, and then this is how many segments there are. So left means before 0. So if I added, we'd have, let's see here. So I had 50 in one direction, 100 in the other. I don't feel like we need that, so I'm just going to remove all of those. Right now we have 2 segments, so I'm just going to add in 4. And then the unit. So let's say I'm going to kick this down to 25. So that means it's going to label every 25. And it'll go out to 100 kilometers. I'm just going to have it go out to 150 kilometers. Just to make it a little longer. All right, I think that looks pretty good. The height, you can make it taller if you want. I'm going to make it slightly taller. Maybe it's too much. And then what else could we do to it? I think that actually looks pretty good. We probably do want to change the font. So I'd prefer all my fonts to, match. So I'm going to change this to Tahoma again, regular. Maybe I'm going to bump it up a little bit in terms of size. See, now we've got too much overlap. So I think I'm going to go back then to the scale bar and maybe have it just label every 50 again. And we'll cut back to breaks. There we go. I think that looks pretty good. Maybe a little big, but I think that's all right. All right, so there we have a legend. Note that you can also change the colors, or add a background color or frame. I don't feel like that's necessary in this case. Let's play around with this. So fill color is black. So let's say that we wanted to use a different fill color, so maybe like a gray. So I'm going to grab this gray here. That changes that. The secondary fill color is the white areas. So maybe we'll use, let's just use black. And well, actually, I'm just gonna actually pick one. So we'll choose color, and I'm gonna make a pretty dark gray. So we'll do hashtag. We'll do 333333. All right. So then we have like a alternating grays for the between the different breaks. You could also change the outline color if you wanted. So this is the line color. It's currently black. We can make it like white. Actually, kind of like that. So anyway, there's a legend. Lots of options for that. All right, the next thing we'd probably want to add would be a scale bar. So I'm going to go to items. Add items. And then, I meant north arrow. So we want to add a north arrow. So click on that, and we'll expand this a bit. And there we have a default north arrow. If you want to change the north arrow, you should be able to go into you can add a different SVG file if you want. Again, this is a vector graphic. So I'm fine with this, but I do want to maybe change it a bit, change up the style a bit. So maybe I'll use like a yellow, and maybe I'll make it a little bit smaller. And we'll stick it over here. That looks okay. All right, you can also add images in. So if you go to add item, you could add an image in, like if you had like a logo or something. It's kind of similar to dropping in a north arrow. All right, what else do we want to add to this? Well, we definitely want a title. So I'm going to do add label. I'm going to put the title down here at the bottom. So we're going to call this percent with bachelor degree. And again, I want the fonts to match. I'm going to switch this to Tahoma, and maybe we'll make it good bit bigger, maybe like 36. Let's see. Yeah, that looks good. I think that looks reasonable. We'd also probably want to add in another little text box that cite the data source. Again, it's really important to cite your data. So I'm going to add a label again, and we're going to say data from U.S. Census. And again, we'll make it Tahoma, and we'll make it a little bit bigger than it is, maybe like 14. Put it right down here in the corner. Note another way to add text and elements is to use HTML, which I think is pretty cool. So you can do add item and then add HTML, and again we could draw out a box here, and we could do source, and then you could do something like p tag data from U.S. Census, and then like close the tag. Fresh, and then that adds that in, but we're not going to do it that way. I just want to note that that's a other way to do it. You can also add an attribute table, adding in arrow symbols and shapes. We looked at legends, adding in a picture, so on and so forth. So I think that's okay. I think that's a decent looking map. So let's say we're ready now to export this out. A couple other options real quick. If you are done editing a certain feature, you can always lock it. That way it can't be manipulated by accident. That's what this is for. You can also turn off visibility of layers there too. Okay, so if you go back to Layout tab here, it tells you what kind of the defaults are. So we have DPI for export, margins and whatnot. So you can change those settings there if you want. I think that's fine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save it first to a PDF. And I'm just going to dump this on my, well, I'll just leave it in this demo folder. So I'm going to call this, I don't know, map PDF, save. And then there's some options there. We don't need to change anything. All right, so I'm going to go into that folder, see what it looks like. So we got C, teaching, and then there should be this new PDF. And there's our rendered PDF. All right, if you want to do some like vector graphics editing, you could use a PDF. You could also save it out to an actual like vector data format. So there's this export to SVG. Note that there's some issues there. So that actually doesn't seem like it's an option. It said it'll let you do it, but it says there might be a problem with it. So we'll call this map SVG, and then save. And just out of curiosity, let's see if it actually did that. I'm going to open with Adobe Illustrator. This is a vector graphics editing software. Okay, and it looks okay. So then you could go in here and do additional vector graphics editing with it. And then lastly, you could also just export out to a like image file. So here we have PNG, TIFF, JPEG, so your common image file formats. So I'm just gonna do that real quick. So this is gonna be map PNG. And again, this would be if you really don't need to do any additional editing. It's limited once you export out to a graphic, compressed raster graphic. There it is as a raster graphic. Okay, so I'm going to save this, and I'm going to exit out of it. So let's say, just to finish up, if you wanted to go back to that map and work on it, or layout and work on it again, you can go to Project, Layout Manager, or your layout list. I'm just going to go layout list, and if we click on it, it'll pull that window back up so you can do some additional editing. All right, so there's other things you can do, but I think that's 90% of the techniques I use when I'm, designing and building maps in QGIS.